this week's City View. Appreciate you tuning in. We try to provide some information to you about what's happening in our city, and I'd like to talk this week a little bit about the City Council action this week on our recommended road plan. As I talk frequently on the show about infrastructure and our challenges as an old city, we need to continue to invest in our infrastructure. We've made remarkable progress in so many areas. For example, our school buildings. We're on our third new school. We've replaced roofs and windows and boilers, and so much of our school buildings have been rebuilt, and a lot of investment in the infrastructure. And I'm grateful to the School Building Authority for their help and their funding toward this program. So we've done a lot of work in that area. We've done a lot of work in other areas as well, but the City Council has been asking for a more comprehensive plan on our roads, rightfully so, and Commissioner Al Graziosa, City Engineer Paul Costello, come up with a plan with some outside help with consultants. We made the initial presentation the first Monday in May to the City Council along with the city budget, and then of course this week, the last City Council meeting of the session, they then go out for break on the summer. We were able to get action this past week on the final vote. So for those councilors that voted for it, thank you very much. For those councilors that spoke in a spirited way in favor of it, thank you very much. This is going to result in what I think a much needed improvement citywide in our roads and sidewalks. So maybe I could just walk through the program a little bit again. This is considered a 5-year roadway infrastructure plan. Now what the City Council approved was up to $17 million in borrowing. That doesn't mean it's a total of $17 million. We'll also use Chapter 90 money. We receive about $1.9 million a year from the state through the gas tax that goes towards roads. We also have areas where CDBG monies, federal block grant monies may be available for certain streets depending if they fall in a CDBG district. So we're cobbling all those numbers together, so it's really probably about a $25 million program over the next 5 years, 17 of which, as I mentioned, we would borrow. Just for some facts and some pretty good facts, we've got over 1,000 roadways totaling about 257 miles of accepted street. Total streets, I'm sorry. Accepted is about 201 miles. Unaccepted streets, which means private roads. There's a lot of private roads in our city. We still plow them. We can still pave them. We still pick up rubbish, but there's about 30 miles of unaccepted roadways in our city. And then, of course, there's 26 miles of state roads. Furnaceburg Parkway, Quincy Shore Drive, for example. Those streets are maintained by MassDOT and the Department of Conservation and Recreation. 98% of the accepted private roads are paved with an approximate value of $201 million, and 304 miles of sidewalk with an approximate value of $200 million as we stand today. So over $400 million in assets that require management planning and replacement. Past road and sidewalk work the last 10 years, we've done some significant work, but we have focused heavily on streets where we've done the water main, the gas main, rebuilt the street entirely, reset the curbing, put new sidewalks in. It comes out very nicely, but that's a lot of dollars for a street. Therefore, you can't do as many streets. Years ago, it was kind of an accepted practice to we used to refer to as painting the streets black, which is mainly do a half-inch overlay on a street, which looks nice for a year or two, but it quickly the cracks start to come through it. You don't have as much reveal on the curb, which creates problem for flooding. So there's all kinds of issues. So we've repaired over 32 miles of roadway, including sidewalks, over the last 10 years. And almost 75% of those included utility work, whether it was water main, gas, or a combination of both. Much of it was asphalt work, and from time to time we have concrete sidewalks or bituminous concrete, which is asphalt sidewalks as well. All streets are done with the asphalt. So this next map, it shows the past 10 years. The dark line that you see throughout the city, those are the last 10 years, the 32 miles of roadway that have been repaired. And if you look quickly at it, they're pretty evenly distributed throughout the city. So every ward and precinct has been treated almost equally in that plan. Same thing with the sidewalk. You get the yellow water main work in the yellow. The sidewalks are in the black on that next slide. Over the last 10 years, again, you'll show, or this will show to you that it's been distributed pretty evenly citywide. So the fiscal 18 road work costs, we had 4 phases. with $5.3 million, 5.2 miles of roads and sidewalks, and 23 roadway sections. So we did 16 full depth reclamations, which is the one I described. It's very expensive. It's digging up the entire road. And then we did 7 overlays, which is a coal plane. Machine actually grinds down 1 to 2 inches of asphalt when the road. Subgrade isn't in bad shape, but it's just the surface that's starting to fail. We go that route and then repave over that. That's very cost effective. We get a lot more miles done for the dollar. 52% of the sidewalks and curbing was part of that total dollar amount. So sidewalks and curbing, very labor intensive, so they are expensive. So it really was about 47% of the money was devoted to pavement management, the rest being curbing and sidewalk. By the way, they're all important. People obviously walk and use the sidewalks. We gotta maintain those as well. So pavement cost alone is about $2.5 million in the fiscal 18 plan. So roadway management planning, we got together several months ago. Quite frankly, it wasn't just the issue of not enough roads being done. I have not been satisfied with the condition of the roads that were recently done. So the history has been using MassDOT, the state's standards, if you will, or specifications for bid. I've asked and challenged our team to let's do better than that, because we're getting roads that are failing earlier than they should be. You know, when you did a major road 30 years ago, you got many, many years out of it, but we're getting these cracks where the seams of the concrete or the asphalt is. You see it on streets. That's not acceptable. So we're looking at a whole different specification, working with our engineers, our consultants. Perhaps there's more oil needed, a different mix, a different leveling course amount. Maybe we should go in a little thicker, but we're looking at all that. So the new specifications going on roadways, I think, will be a big improvement in that those roadways will last much longer. You know, and we're going to do everything we can to be as efficient and as sharp as possible. So we're actually going to have a better specification than what MassDOT uses, in my opinion. So part of the planning was the city doing an assessment of what we have, work with an outside consultant to help us do that. Our city engineers, Al Grazioso, Paul Costello, and our outside consultant really put together a terrific, comprehensive plan looking at every mile of roadway in our city. And you know, there's some argument on the planning side, particularly from the outside consultant, is if a road is just starting to fail, dollar-wise, it makes more sense to put a little bit of money into that road so that it extends the life of it, rather than spending a lot of money on a road that is in much worse shape, but you end up doing the whole street over. Therefore, it costs a lot more dollars. So that road that is failing, with a little patching, we can get maybe a couple more years out of it, catch up on some of those roads that are in that decent condition but are starting to show some signs of failure, and we can stretch the dollars far more. So we got a roadway management plan in place. Again, we're assessing every street, and that includes the utilities. We work with the National Grid, which is the old Boston Gas Company, about gas main replacement. There was several years where the gas company was not doing any investment in the city, but the last couple of years they're spending some serious money on investment. And when the gas main goes in, obviously you're digging up the road, you create a trench, the trench starts to settle, it becomes an issue. The same goes with the water mains. When you do a water main over, the water mains are much deeper than gas mains, so there's far more settling in the trenches. And the recommendation under any consultant when it comes to roadway management is that you let it go through a freeze-thaw cycle once, so that the settlement occurs, you have the freezing and thawing, and then you could go and pave. Otherwise, you risk paving that new street, you're going to have further settlement, and then you're going back and fixing that street again. Doesn't make sense. So, you know, assessing everything, we're trying to be as economic as we can, efficient as we can, and by doing this with a roving 5-year plan, having the dollar approved earlier, the dollar amount, we can hit the streets in the spring. We can bid in the winter, hit the streets in the spring. Under the old Chapter 90 money way, we couldn't bid it until you approached July because you couldn't get the money from the state till July. So you're not hitting the streets till mid to late July, and then you're rushing before the winter sets in to try to get it finished. It's not a good cycle. And so this is going to make far more sense. We'll get a lot more work done. We'll get a better price because we're bidding it in the winter when the contractors are hungry. and we're paving during the summer months when it's ideal to pave. You don't want to be paving in cold weather because you don't get the good finish. So all of those things have kind of been looked at all the data on the water and sewer and drain lines, gas lines, and all that will be kind of interjected or overlaid as far as the program goes going forward, and decisions will be made based on that. Here's a good slide that kind of shows a street with a couple of houses on it. People generally forget that, you turn your faucet on, you don't really think about the distribution system that gets that water to the faucet. You flush the toilet, you don't think about the distribution system that takes it out from your home and eventually out to the treatment facilities. There's a lot of infrastructure that is hidden under the ground, and it's not sexy to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about it unless something goes wrong and you need to get it fixed, so then it's an emergency. But it's, we're an old city with old infrastructure where you can continue to invest in maintaining that infrastructure. And that could be underground electrical conduits. It could be cable underground conduits. It's clearly drainage, it's sewerage, water. I should point out that in Quincy we have separate sewer and drain lines. Boston has a combined system, which is problematic actually environmentally. So ours is a separate system, so that's another pipe. And then of course the gas mains, as I talked about, also are underground pipes. They're not as deep as the water, but they are underground. So you get into an awful lot of, in some cases, I remember when McGrath Highway was done over years ago, it was really like spaghetti under the ground. There was so much infrastructure under there that we had to accommodate for, and it gets tricky because there's only so much space to work with as well. So it's a nice little slide here that shows that. The storm sewer system, that's the biggest pipe that it shows, because you get the main trunks, then you get the houses that feed into that. Water mains, you get the main lines, different sizes, could be 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch. Then that feeds the neighborhoods and businesses, and the same goes with the gas. Pavement life cycle showing here is interesting. These are some graphs that show what percentage are in excellent condition, very good condition, fair, poor, and what's failing. So we're right in the middle in that range. So we got about 60%. But I know, folks, you can show all the graphs you want. It's the condition of your street. I get it, that you think that may need to be paved. And we're just trying to lay out for you is that there is a science to this. There is a comprehensive plan. And this is the first time in a long time we've had a comprehensive plan. And this will be really the roadmap, the Bible, the encyclopedia, what do you want to call it, that we're going to operate off of over the next 5 years. Now, there's always the chance that something goes wrong. If you have a major water main break that causes a complete disruption for a street, well, that street then becomes a higher priority. So though we'll have a list, sometimes things shift based on certain conditions and things that happen that you don't see coming. And certainly water mains, we can't predict those. We don't know where they'll happen. And then the benefits of early maintenance, pavement maintenance. This is a little bit what I talked about by taking those streets that maybe get some crack showing, and some of you may have seen it, the crack sealing. We have a company that comes out, and there's a compressor on the front end of the truck where they clean out the cracks, make sure any sediment is out of the crack, and then behind on the back side of the truck, there's actually a liquid asphalt that gets poured into those cracks. That seals the roadway once again, because what happens is once the roadway is compromised, once you've got the cracking and opening up, the water gets in it, then you get into the winter, the freezing, and then the potholes start popping, and before you know it, the subgrade is in very poor condition, and all of a sudden we got to reclaim the whole street. So there is a science to this. If you're following along, we've got some great people that have worked on this, so we're grateful for their work. So there's different alternatives. Maintenance, number one, is the cheapest, and that is the microsurface that we're talking about. It's a crack sealing, it's an overlay, and it works pretty well for those roads that are in decent condition. We can get several more years out of it. For example, we did that on Bergen Parkway. We did that on Southern Artery down near Quincy Avenue last year. Both of those long stretches were done by microsealing. It was done overnight, so it didn't interfere with traffic, and it moves much more quickly. And the second piece is leveling courses, and then the microsurfacing. So there's 2 courses that would be used, and that's a little more in detail than than it would be otherwise with the first one. But this could include some cold planing, taking an inch or two off, and then surfacing over that. Then of course the third one is really reconstructing the pavement completely. So reclamation. So actually come in, ripping all the asphalt out, regrading the street, resetting the curbing, and making those adjustments. That is the most expensive course of action. So the pavement condition index and pavement maintenance program, this slide shows that there's some streets we don't have to do anything at this point. There's a number of streets that are in good condition where we can do the preventive maintenance, a number that are in fair condition, which could be a resurface. Then you get into the poor and failing streets, and those are really complete reconstruction and rehabilitation. This map, a pavement management plan, it shows you all the different colors, but it shows the base rehabilitation in red, structural improvements in purple, preventive maintenance in yellow, routine maintenance in the blue, and then those that we don't need to do anything on at this point are in the green. Just shows you we're a dense city and we have a lot of roadways and sidewalks to deal with. So here's the estimation of the citywide pavement maintenance cost. And I think that question was asked the other night to the Commissioner of Public Works by one of the city councils. If we had to fix everything today, what would it cost? And that number is about $70 million. Well, obviously we don't have $70 million in the till. That's why we have to program this out, doing so much each year as our budget allows. Just like get your home, you got a budget. If you need a roof, you put the roof in. If you need your sidewalk, your driveway done over, perhaps you buy a few more years out of it because you got to put some money aside to do it. You got to borrow some money to do it. It's no different in the city. We can't do everything we want to do right up front. And this chart shows a little bit about how we break out the cost, and depending on the pavement condition index, obviously, is how we respond to each street. So if we had to do it today, one-shot deal, we're in the $70 million range. The 5-year program shows $5 million a year to get on the street. And the reality is, folks, even if we had $70 million, there aren't enough contractors out there that could do it all at once. As it is now, there's only a handful that bid on these things in municipalities in our area. So they're not, there's no company big enough to do the kind of numbers that we would need to be done if we had the money on hand to start with. So then, of course, we have the water distribution system. This is getting back to that example of the sink. We're part of the MWRA district, so the water actually starts at Quabbin Reservoir in the western part of Massachusetts. People have heard of James Michael Curley as the mayor of Boston. He was also governor of Massachusetts, and it was under his direction to create the Quabbin Reservoir. They actually moved 7 small towns, cemeteries and everything, moved them, and then redirected some of the river flow and created the Quabbin Reservoir, which today provides some of the best water quality in the world. In addition, it's a beautiful environmental location. If you ever have the chance to go out, the eagles that nest in the islands in that reservoir, it's amazing. So it starts there and it makes its way towards Boston. And as I said, the MWRA has done a lot of work, a lot of investment in the program, in the pipes, and we are fortunate. I know people aren't happy about paying for water. It has become more expensive over the last 20 years. However, quality-wise, it's the best water around. And it's funny, people don't squawk about the cable bill, but they squawk about the water bill, and water is essential, obviously, to life. So we have a good relationship with the MWR. We got 240 miles of water mains. 18 miles were installed before 1900. 95 miles are 1930 or prior to that. So they're getting up there in age. So when you have the movement in winters and just the condition and age of the pipe. In fact, in the 1920s, some of the steel pipes ended up being some bad steel. We've had a lot of issues with those over the years. So we've got a lot of unlined older pipe, about 80 miles of that needs to be dealt with. So when the DPW is looking at roads, they're also looking at the condition of the water mains and make decisions at that time which mains to replace. So there is a solid plan. And the cost of the water mains comes out of, or any sewer work comes out of the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. And the way that works is you pay for your water and your sewer based on what you use. It's not supplemented by the general budget. It's pay as you go. It's a user related fee, so that whatever you're using at home, that's directly what you pay. All that money has to go into the sewer and water cost of operating, what we pay for the water from the MWRA, what we pay to have our sewer handled on the other end by the MWRA, and then of course any new investment into our system, we pay for that out of that budget as well. There's other utilities. We've got a lot of miles of sewer in the city, 208 miles of sewer, and those generally last longer and not so much of an issue, but when something does happen, the expense of fixing a sewer is far greater than a water main. They are deeper. In some cases, they're on piles in different parts of our city. So I guess the most recent example would have been the Rice Road project a few years ago we started, which took longer because we found that the sewer was compromised and had to go in and redo the sewer system. Then, of course, we have 150 miles of drain pipe. There's more than 9,000 catch basins across the city. That's the corner of your street. Perhaps you'll see the catch basin there where the water flows into. And then it's more than 3,000 drain manholes that go with that. So much of the drainage system ends up into Quincy Bay, Neponset River, Town River. It flows just naturally by gravity out into those areas. So we've been paying closer attention on the quality of what gets into the bay. So we've done a lot more work in stopping stuff from getting to the bay. Obviously, the cleaner water that goes into the bay, the less disruption we have in swimming in the bay as well. So we continue to work that issue. That could be a whole nother show showing that whole system for sure. But it's one more thing Public Works deals with. Then, of course, gas, electric, telecommunications, and others would be part of those other utilities that are underground. So there's a number of variables, as we've talked about, in managing the roads, the safety, the roadway usage, arterial, residential, the life cycle and pavement condition index, which we now are using to make decisions, the utilities, as I mentioned, comes into play. Those are factors, what it costs for reclamation versus prevention, sidewalk needs, and then, of course, you get into other issues that deal with it, and that's trees. We get trees on our side streets and our loom borders that sometimes get interfered with by road construction, and vice versa. They're popping up our sidewalks with the root growth, and so that's always a challenge. And then, of course, the other variables, available funding. So investments that we made or are making in this is coming up with a full 5-year design construction funding. Continue to update it every year, but it'll be a 5-year rolling program. And we'll deal with a number of those issues that I've talked about as part of it. And then, of course, how do roads get selected? And that's something I get from people all the time. How come my street isn't? I've lived here 30 years. My street has never been touched. And that's a good question. We have to prioritize. So the main arterials are the ones that carry the most traffic. You got to keep those in great shape. Then there's the secondary thoroughfares. I'll give you some examples of that. A real main arterial is Southern Artery, is Hancock Street, is Newport Avenue. A secondary thoroughfare may be Harvard Street or Beale Street. They're all important. Those would take a higher priority than a little side street that doesn't get as much traffic. So this chart here talks a little about that decision modeling and how we get to that point, what the considerations are, and then eventually what the cost is. Water, road, and sidewalk planning, we talk about linear footage, and there's a number of charts here that we've shown you today's show, but I think we've covered the gamut of it. There's another plan that shows new roads in red, the water mains in red and yellow, and the alternate roads in green under the pavement management plan. So the 5-year funding, as I mentioned, I talked about the road 5-year funding, but also the water main 5-year funding. We do get monies, zero interest loans from the MWRA to do work, which is very helpful, and then our own investment. We're still doing about $15 million worth of water main work over the next 5 years in conjunction with the roadway replacement program. So as I mentioned, it's a $17 million project over the next 5 years of city money. It will also have Chapter 90 money, and we'll also have some community development block grant money as well. So stay tuned. You certainly can check in with Public Works if you have any questions about it. This office is always available. I have a slide here that shows the 2018 roadway selections. There's some that are carried over from last year water mains, and then 2018. We're looking at Garfield Street, Kidder Street, Kittredge Ave, Narragansett Road, North Payne Street, Ruggles Street, Samoset Ave, South Street, Station Street, Taylor Street, and Winslow Road. Those would be water main work and construction, which would then lead to resurfacing the following year. So you can check in on the city's website. I think the plan is on the website, but you can also talk to Public Works at any time. You can call this office for more details. So I appreciate you tuning in on this. It's comprehensive, it's overdue. I'm pretty grateful to the City Council for their work. And I did want to just recap, finish the show off with our Flag Day celebration that we just held this past weekend. It was a phenomenal weekend. The weather was just perfect. The crowds were huge up at the ceremony along the parade route, and of course for the fireworks. We honored two incredible individuals, and again I want to thank them for their service. Peter Thompson, who's done so much on the substance abuse side of things in our school system, providing about $100,000 out of pocket and some fundraising he's done to assist us in this terrible scourge. So we thank Peter and congratulate him for receiving the Richard J. Koch Youth Service Award. And Tom Galvin. Tom has been an amazing institution here in the city for a long time. Quincy historian. He does the weekly column in the Quincy Sun showing the old postcards. He's the chairman of the Cemetery Board of Management. He's been active in the Chamber of Commerce. He does cemetery tours. He's just an incredible asset to the city, and nobody loves the city more than Tom, and he really believes in carrying that history, make sure people understand the history of the great city. So we congratulate them. We thank everybody that was involved. Obviously the police, fire, park and rec, DPW, all those departments that work hard on it, all the volunteers that come together, that put their own time in and work hard on it. For those who didn't notice, our Quincy, North Quincy band looked fantastic. They sounded great. They got their new uniforms. It's just awesome. But we had 10 bands in the parade, a lot of specialty units, and mostly the kids. We had a lot of maybe 2,000 kids represented in that parade from the various youth leagues and scouting, carrying that flag down the street, taking pride in this great parade that's been going on for a long, long time. So, you know, the weather made the night, obviously. Congressman Lynch marched along with us with that contingent of elected officials, and I didn't get hit with any tomatoes or eggs, so we got through it. But again, thank you for tuning into it. It's an awesome event. Really the start of summer in Quincy in so many ways. School's wrapping up now. We'll be closing the schools very soon. We've had that graduations. I hope you and your loved ones get an opportunity to get away a little bit, whether it's the beach or up in the mountains somewhere. So we'll be continuing to give you the weekly updates, but for those of you who get some vacation time, enjoy it. I hope you have a very safe and happy summer. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time on City View.